married or in a committed relationship looking for real advice on having love and enriching your relationship? You are in the right place. Welcome to The Couples Expert with Stuart Fensterheim.
Hello there, and welcome to the Couples Expert podcast. This is Stuart Fensterheim, the Couples Expert. I am very excited to do this podcast today because I have just gotten back from spending an entire week off, it's actually 4 days, at Forest House, which is in Oak Creek Canyon. Oak Creek Canyon is right outside of Sedona, Arizona. And what's so wonderful about Oak Creek Canyon is the cabins that my wife and I stayed at were right there on the creek, so that we could come out on our balcony every morning, have a cup of coffee, and just hear the wonderful sounds of the creek, see the people, and it's just such a wonderful town, Oak Creek Canyon. For those of you that don't know it, it's outside of Sedona, about 20 minutes. And you take this incredibly windy road, and when you get to Oak Creek Canyon, it's like another time. And what's cool about these cabins, and one of the things that I really appreciated, is that there's no internet. Now, some of you may go, no internet? How are you going to stand being out there with no internet? Well, if you enjoy camping or living in cabins, you know what's the most wonderful experience about no internet is no bombardment of fake news, talk about the Russian probe, and just allowing yourself to just enjoy hiking and being together with the love of your life. And Debbie and I were able to really just relax and take it easy. And what was so much fun for me is that right before we left, I had just finished my last round of my Hold Me Tight weekend, 2 days and 7 conversations, where we had couples coming in disconnected. They leave in such a better place. And this whole retreat weekend becomes an experience in itself. And then to go from helping couples really connect and then leaving for 4 days with my wife, where I got to connect with her in such a wonderful way, was a really nice way of spending the last 6 days. And we stayed at a cabin called the Cloud House there. And those of you that live in Arizona who may know Forest House, this is a 2-story cabin there. And what's sort of interesting about it, it actually is a cabin that I learned about by a woman that I dated right before meeting my wife. And she took me there. She took me to this cabin called the Cloud House, and I've been wanting very much to take my wife there. And as you may imagine, unless you have a secure relationship, she might have an issue with this. And what's interesting is I hear a lot of couples talking about that I don't want to do anything that you may have done with an old girlfriend. So what that is really about is insecurity of a relationship. And because my wife and I have worked so hard being very secure and everything's out on the table, she knew we were going there. She knew that I met, and here's the more interesting one, the woman who took me there, her name was Debbie also. So I must have a thing for Debbies. And I also have an aunt named Debbie who I love very much. So Debbie is a really positive experience for me. And my wife, Debbie, and I spent 4 days there just enjoying the experience. We brought our dog Jax with us and we took him hiking. We just did so many wonderful things. And I just want to say that I am so excited about being back and that I'm glad to be able to do this podcast on financial infidelity. And what's wonderful about this podcast is what I hope it becomes for all of you listening is really an intellectual and emotional experience. Because infidelity, as we all know, has to do with a trust violation, and there's nothing that can destroy a relationship more than a trust violation. And that the financial infidelity is one of the few infidelities that don't really get talked about. Now, how did I come about doing this and coming up with this idea of having this episode be this? Is a couple weeks ago, my wife and I were going to a party, a Cinco de Mayo party. This is a couple that we're very good friends with that does this party almost every year. But this year, it's Cinco de Mayo and Kentucky Derby, both on the same day, which is pretty cool. And we wanted this year to get dressed up because we've never really done that. So what we decided we were going to do is have this party be more fun than usual because we're getting dressed up. So I went online and I purchased a hat, a Kentucky Derby hat, and she did the same. And we're putting little horses and we're doing all of these things. And I started to think about, these parties sometimes can get expensive. If we're not careful, the cost of the hat, the cost of the decoration, all these different things can get pricey if you're not careful. When I went online looking for a Kentucky Derby hat, I saw them anywhere ranging from $5 to $500. And I wanted to do this. And my wife wanted to do this. But one of the problems is, and some of you may know this, but a lot of you probably don't, I tend to be very cheap, and buying things can be difficult for me. And spending a lot of money is something that stresses me out. And let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. We just recently had to replace a part in our air conditioning. And there's a part that went out, and that if we don't do the part, it's going to cost us a fair amount of money. And what I focus on is the fact that this service call was going to be about $800. And I was telling my wife that I really don't want to spend that kind of money. And she began to figure for me what we would save from our electric bill having this part, and it was more than what it would cost us for the repair. And I was struggling with doing that. Money in our relationship at times can be a really difficult thing if we don't talk about it. And money in a lot of relationships do that. So what ends up happening for some couples is they begin to avoid telling their partners about money spent. And that little task, that little thing of not sharing how much something costs you or how much you spent on an item can become a major trust violation in your relationship. Let me give you some examples of what I'm talking about. If you go and you buy an $1,000 set of golf clubs and you hide that from your partner, or you lie about how much it costs, or you take the money from an account that your wife or husband may not know about, that's a violation. If you go to a nail salon and you spend $300 on a manicure and a pedicure, and you don't tell your partner you just did that, that could be a trust violation. If you're wanting to buy your partner a present, a Christmas present, a birthday present, and you know that they really, really want a dog, and you really, really, really want to buy it from a breeder, but your partner asks you to not do that because of the cost, and you do it anyway, but you don't tell them where you really got it, that's financial infidelity. You're lying. It's a trust violation. Opening up a checking account that your partner doesn't know about and putting a few dollars away for a rainy day and your partner doesn't know you're doing it, that's financial infidelity. And so often what ends up happening is we do these kinds of things not recognizing how much of a violation it is. So what we're going to be talking about on this episode of the Couples Expert podcast is we're going to talk about infidelity that doesn't typically get talked about. Because typically we hear about physical and emotional violations, infidelities, but we don't usually talk about how much of a violation it is when one partner lies, and there's no other way of saying it, it is a lie, about money issues. And what ends up happening for a lot of folks is they begin to think about, if my partner is lying about this, what else are they lying about? If I can't trust that I know where our money is going, what else is missing? Are there stocks and investments that my partner has squandered away? Is my lifetime retirement money secure and safe, or has my partner spent it on something that they wanted and didn't tell me about it? You see, nothing is more tragic than a violation of trust and an inability to see your partner as someone who has your back. Anything that happens then gets triggered through those lenses. And if there's no money in your accounts, what would you do? Will you end up homeless? Is your partner putting money away because they're thinking about leaving you and they need money for a rainy day for that one day when they do? Betrayal is betrayal is betrayal. And if we don't have a stable confidence in your financial future, what does it mean about your partner and whether or not they truly are interested in your well-being? There are so many things that come up around this issue, and some of them have to do with your family background, and did you come from a poor background, a well-to-do background? But lying is lying. There is no such thing here when it comes to your finances as a white lie. White lie is a lie. And when we're talking about our resources that also impact the children and their future, what kind of anger and rage does that bring up? So what we need to do here when we're talking about this is recognizing that financial infidelity can be truly a sticky wicket because sometimes it's difficult to define. So what I want to do is define it for you. And that I want to have us really understand that there's a lot of levels here, and that how you two handle your finances, whether you have separate accounts or joint accounts, we need to have it all on the table, that having a separate checking account doesn't mean that you have privacy about what's in your accounts. This is our money all the time. When you're in a marriage, when you're in a relationship, you have to see your financial possessions, your investments, your cash, your home, and everything. There is no separation here. Whether one of you makes more money than the other, there is no separation. It's our money. You don't get to decide what happens to your money without your wife or husband, regardless of whether they work or not. And I would suggest, I'm going to get emails of people saying to me, what do you mean regardless if they work? If you're a stay-at-home mom or dad, you work harder than the person who goes out and works in their job. I guarantee you that. And that is my philosophy. Your partner is an equal contributor regardless of whether or not they get a paycheck. And the two of you better come at your financial life as a couple, as a partnership, as board of directors to a multi-million-dollar corporation. Because if the two of you are doing the things you need to do financially, you're likely going to have 401ks and other types of investments that exceed $1 million, because you should start those conversations early on. And if you haven't had that conversation, have that conversation. This is about what do you want for your retirement, your children's lives, and the two of you better be on board with all of those things. And there better not be any secrets, because if there are, it can destroy your marriage. That's financial infidelity. There are many levels of this. You and your partner have to have agreements on what amounts you're able to spend with complete autonomy. And you should have that. You should have the ability to go out and get your nails done without turning to your husband or your partner and saying, is it okay? It should be okay. The two of you should come up with an amount of money that is agreeable, and based on your financial resources, obviously that's going to change how much that is, of what you're able to spend with autonomy, and then what happens if you exceed that amount. Because sometimes it happens. Unexpected. It's not that I went in there. Sometimes I went in there, I got my nails done, I thought it was going to be $50, $60, $70, and I get the check and it's $150. And I've already done it. How do you handle that? Do you lie and not tell your husband or wife? I guess if it's a manicure, pedicure, it's likely going to be your husband. Or do you go home and say, I overspent, didn't mean to, how should we handle that? Those kinds of conversations need to happen between the two of you. We have to delve into what exactly does financial infidelity mean? And what are some of the consequences for betrayal in this area? If you have lied to your partner and you have not told them where you have spent some money, stop right now. Turn to your partner and let them know that there's a problem here. I talked with physical infidelity that you're better off coming clean sometimes than not telling them. And coming clean doesn't mean I've done it already. Coming clean means our relationship is in trouble and I'm thinking of having an affair. That's what I'm talking about right now. I'm talking about turning to your partner and saying, I'm thinking of cheating. In this situation, though, a little different than that one, you might need to come clean in saying, I've already committed infidelity with our finances. When that typically happens is when it gets discovered, and it gets discovered in god-awful ways. Typically, a banker calling someone, or a bill, or a credit card company, or a bill collector, or what ends up happening is you're about to go on your vacation and you thought your partner had money set aside for the vacation, and what turns out is they had to use that money to pay the monthly expenses. Or worse yet, not having the money for your child's college education. And now you have to go tell your child that you have no money saved up, and they have to go to a community college and not a university. And what does that do? And what does that do to your marriage when your husband or wife thought you had $20,000 saved up, but you spent it on something else without their authorization? That's the kind of stuff that happens. Today's podcast is sponsored by Before You Tie the Knot, 12 Essential Conversations. Planning a wedding and a future together can be stressful, and the couples expert is here to give you a little bit of relief. Whether it's now or in the future, the decision to marry is one of the most important decisions you'll ever make. We don't know what we don't know, so I've produced a 12-week course for you and your partner called Before You Tie the Knot, 12 Essential Conversations to Have Before You Marry. There isn't a lot of premarital training and education out there, so I've created 12 modules that address the challenges you and your partner are likely to face as you enter into married life. This course is taken at your pace. There's no time pressure, and I've included some fun challenges and bonus exercises for you and your partner to explore and learn together. I'll be lending support as you go through the course by live Q&A sessions and discussions in a Facebook group exclusively for those of you going through the program. Before You Tie the Knot covers many of the issues and discussions that couples need to have before they get married, included family planning, finances, work-life integration, spirituality, and more. Go to www.thecouplesexperts.com for Before You Tie the Knot and find out what you need to know for a successful and happy marriage. So the question that comes up is your spouse committing financial infidelity? How do you know if it's happening? I think everyone should have access to every single type of investment and resources. And I hear quite often in my office people saying, I don't really have that much of an interest in it. I let my partner handle it. He's better at it than I am. Math is not something that I was good at. He's good at it. He's an investment banker. He does this kind of stuff for a living. So he's handling it. And I say, so how much are you two worth? And they say, I have no idea. Why don't you? Why don't you take an interest in your future? Your husband or your wife shouldn't do it for you. You should take a class if you need to. You need to get better at this. Every single account that you have should be open for scrutiny. And if you don't know all the accounts that you have or where that information is, you need to get it right now. When's the last time you've looked at them? When's the last time you ran a credit report on both of you? I think there's these free annual credit reports. Everyone should be running at least every year or two an entire credit report to see every single thing that's listed. You should do that together. You should sit down together quarterly and go through the books. Go through what your expenses are. Go through your bookkeeping. Go through all your accounts. And I'm hoping that most of you have someone that you meet with that's a financial planner or someone to help you, making sure that all the things you're doing are working for you. The avoidance of financial infidelity is everything gets discussed. When I turn to some couples who come to see me in my office, and I ask, how much does your husband make in his job? They don't know. How much does your wife make? They don't know. Why don't you know? Why don't you care? You need to. You need to know all of these things. One way of finding out if there's some problem here is, are there purchases being made that you're not sure when it happened? Do things just show up? Are bills not being paid when they're due? Do you have collectors calling your home and you thought everything was taken care of? If that's happening, you need to ask some questions. When you ask those questions, does your partner get defensive? If someone is getting defensive with you about those kinds of things, you need to start delving into that. You need to really having an open scrutiny of all the finances that are going on in your home. That's your best way of avoiding financial infidelity. Now, what are the consequences of this? The betrayal that comes with financial infidelity is tricky. Oh, there was something I forgot to talk about. When it comes to this, the consequences and the problems that come with this is life insurance. Do you know how much life insurance the two of you have? Do you know if it's one their cash is dispersed on a regular basis or not? Those are all those kinds of questions we need to be asking ourselves. Here's another question to ask yourself to see if you're committing financial infidelity. If God forbid something happened to you and you died tomorrow on your way home from work, is your partner going to find out something about your finances that are going to surprise them, that might not look so good? There's nothing that brings up more anxiety for our partners than the lack of financial security. I have a couple of couples in my practice right now that are struggling big time. And part of that struggle is because they don't feel that their partner is interested in securing their relationship financially. That there's a will and they're not a beneficiary in it. These are couples that are not married, as a matter of fact. It's a little different if there is a marriage, maybe worse. You need to feel secure that your relationship has an element of reality in it that is about a secure financial future for both of you. If anyone is hiding money, there's a serious problem in the relationship. If you're hiding purchases, there's a serious problem in your relationship. If there's impulse buying and you're not talking it over, there's a serious problem in the relationship. If there are financial questions that are being asked and not just being forthcoming, and the two of you aren't discussing them openly and freely, there's a problem in your relationship. You should be having these discussions, as I said earlier. So, how do we move beyond this? And I think the way we move beyond this, for the most part, is full disclosure. And you need to be willing to be open about what's been going on. If you've had any of this kind of deception, I highly recommend avoiding separate checking accounts. Everything should be a joint account. You need to be sitting down together and going through the bank accounts and checking statements, and both of you should be receiving those statements and you should be looking them over together to making sure that there isn't anything going on that you're not aware of. Talk to each other about all of this, about the things you want to spend. There shouldn't be punitive actions for this discussion. We need to sort of have a come clean, my wife will laugh at the way I'm going to say this, but a coming to Jesus discussion about your finances and what it's been like and what's been going on, and that right now what you need to do is come clean. You can't go back and undo what's happened. We all know that. And the two of you need to get together and begin to develop a plan on changing the nature of your relationship to have no deceptions whatsoever. You have to get to a place where you can give and receive an apology. I've talked in the past about sincere apologies, and that just saying I'm sorry is not a sincere apology. And the problem for most people is when they get to the apology is done too quick or not soon enough. It's a balancing act. You have to have a secure sense of each other to know when the apology needs to happen and that you're apologizing because the pain and anguish that you feel because you've harmed your partner in a deep, profound way is so painful for you that you can't even stand it. And the emotions and the words have to go together. Because to repair this relationship injury is as deep and as profound as if someone cheated and had sex with someone else outside the marriage. The more difficult part of all of this is you have to believe that you didn't set out to hurt each other. and that the hurting has to stop, which includes the blaming and punishing. You have to work on the emotional pieces at the same time as you do the financial issues. So you've got to work on open disclosure, showing each other the financial situation, talking about how we're going to heal from it, going and consulting an expert if you need to on your finances, including, I believe, if you have financial infidelity going on. There is no choice here. You need to also be seeing a couples counselor. Anytime there's a trust violation like this, you can't do it on your own. You have to have someone who's an expert, both at emotional connection and an expert of repairing a relationship that has this kind of betrayal. The emotional repair that's necessary is living with the financial consequences every single day, because these types of injuries don't just go away quickly. Every time it's time to pay your bills, you'll be reminded of it. And the financial consequences for some of you will take years to repair. And you need to be able to do that repair, looking your partner square in the face, knowing that you harmed them, knowing that they've accepted you doing that, and that the two of you are about to work every single day, committed to this relationship, repairing the financial difficulties, and that you're doing it together with love. And sometimes it means coming clean to the children and letting them know what happens. Because some of you, it has gotten to the point where you're going to have to declare bankruptcy. And then the family issues come there too. And other people will likely get to know this, in-laws, because you may need to ask people for help. These are not small issues. It's going to be a long road of working through this and learning to live with the consequences. But it's worth it, because rebuilding the trust requires a plan and a great deal of that forgiveness. And education is so very important here. You need to learn how to properly handle your money and learn how to set yourself up for success in your future. And as I started some of this with, one of the things that I think the two of you need to be careful and know that you're doing, particularly if this is part of the problem, is regular check-ins and accounting of what you spent every month, and talking about why you spent what you spent, and was it really necessary? Talking about what you want to spend on and what is the best interest of the two of you as a couple, as a family. You don't get to just buy something because you want to buy it. You have to do it because it's a good thing for both of you. My brother and his wife just recently spent a large sum of money on dune buggies. They both were committed to it. Imagine if one of them did that without checking. Those are the kinds of things that come up. You need to make a budget together and plan to pay off all of your debt and stick to it. Avoiding these kinds of conversations creates an elephant in the room. You know it's there, but you choose not to address it until it blows up in your face like a hidden landmine. Don't do that to yourself. The best way to deal with these money conversations is to be open and honest with your partner. The more authentic you are with them, the more likely they're going to really see what's occurred as a problem and not defining the entire relationship. You have to get down to the nitty-gritty part in order for you to achieve something meaningful and strengthen your relationship once again. Not just regarding the finances, because the biggest injury, as we've talked about, is the trust. The biggest injury is feeling alone and feeling like you don't have a partner that cares about what matters to you, and all of us want to have a secure financial future because the two of you need to face life as a couple. And so often what happens is we don't do that. So these things can start out really small, just a manicure, pedicure, but blow up into something so big. So the amount that you spend on a purchase is a symptom to a bigger problem. If you're not telling your partner or you're hiding receipts, those are symptoms to a really big problem of a lack of trust, a lack of confidence, and a lack of being straightforward, authentic, and genuine. Don't do that. Don't hide purchases in your car. If you go and you spend $5 on something that you think your wife or your husband might say something, and then you throw the receipt away before you get in the house so no one sees it, no big deal, but it can become one. And be careful. Thank you for joining me. I hope this would spur some conversations between the two of you about this financial infidelity issue. And stay tuned for our next week's episode, which is on shopping meltdowns. How to cope with one or the other of your partners having shopping meltdowns when you're out there just looking for a good deal. Talk to you soon. Stay connected, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye now.
Thank you for listening. This episode has ended, but your journey continues. Head over to www.thecouplesexperts.com to access all the links and resources mentioned in this episode, as well as bonus content exclusive to podcast listeners. Enjoyed this episode? Why not hit subscribe now and never miss an episode?